Hey guys, it's Olivia. Welcome back to your endocrinology chapter. In this video, we're going to be discussing feedback loops. And feedback loops are going to be important because they are your body's way to regulate how much of a hormone is released at one time. They're a way to regulate the interplay between different hormones. And they're an incredibly elegant and beautiful mechanism for your body to make real-time changes and adjustments to different pathways based off of how many hormones are in circulation at one time or different stimuli that your body receives. So there's going to be two different types of feedback loops that I want you to be aware of. There are going to be your negative feedback loops, and your negative feedback loops are going to be where the end products are going to downregulate our production. So the end products are going to downregulate or shut off our production. And that is going to be in contrast to your positive feedback loops, where the end products are going to actually increase production of that early hormone. And we'll talk about both of these more in detail in a second. So first, let's talk about your negative feedback loops. So when I think about negative feedback loops, I always go back to the business principles of supply and demand. And because I'm in Portland and I'm surrounded by Nike, we'll use the Nike business model as our example of the business principles of supply and demand, which are going to exemplify our negative feedback loop. So when Nike decides that they want to make a new shoe, they are going to reach out to their procurement department. They'll send a signal here, a positive signal, as you can see, to their procurement department saying, please, we need to make a new shoe. Their procurement department is then going to send another positive signal to their factory or their production department, and the factory is going to produce that new shoe, and Nike gets a new Jordan that they can release into supply. However, the amount of Jordans needs to be just right, because if you have too few Jordans in circulation, you are not going to be making enough money. But if you have too many Jordans in circulation, then their value is going to decrease, right? They're not as rare because the supply has outpaced the demand. That is going to not support the business model, and that is going to be a problem for the sales at Nike. So Nike has a great regulatory mechanism here whereby when you have too many Jordans, when the amount of Jordans in circulation or in the market exceeds the amount that is beneficial, then the Jordans are going to send a signal to shut off these different points of regulation of this pathway. So we are going to shut down production of the Jordans when there are too many in the marketplace. We will shut down the pathway when there is too much of this end product or this hormone in circulation in the body. And if you understand these simple principles of supply and demand, then I think it's really easy to apply them to hormonal pathways, for example, the cortisol pathway. So if instead of our Nike headquarters procurement and factory departments, we had our hypothalamus that was releasing CRH, then that signals our pituitary to in turn release ACTH or adrenocorticotropic hormone, then that in turn signaling our adrenal glands to produce more Jordans, which in this case is going to symbolize our end product or our cortisol. Then that cortisol, you can see in turn, is going to be what we are titrating in the body. So when the concentration of cortisol gets too high, then we start to have this negative feedback. And when we have too much cortisol, then this negative feedback will turn off our pituitary or turn off our procurement department. We will not have any more ACTH being produced. Similarly, it will turn off our Nike headquarters or will turn off our hypothalamus, so we will not have CRH being produced. And eventually, this will lead to a decrease in signaling of the adrenal glands that will lead to a decrease in the production of cortisol, and that is why we term this a negative feedback loop, because the feedback is going to shut this pathway down and decrease the concentration of the end product, thus it has a negative effect. This is going to be in contrast to our positive feedback loops, wherein the end products are actually going to increase the amount of hormone that we are producing. So a different model that I like to think about when I think about my positive feedback loops is a business like Trader Joe's that is all about positive customer feedback. So if you've ever been in a Trader Joe's during pumpkin season, there are 1,001 pumpkin products. They're always trialing new products and always sending you surveys and asking surveys about, how are these products doing? And if the products are doing well, which of course they usually are because they are popular, then you get positive customer feedback. So if the products are doing well, you get this positive customer feedback, and this is going to tell Trader Joe's that they could sell more of these products, so they will make more of them. And so in this scenario, we are getting this positive customer feedback, which is actually going to increase our production here of said pumpkin products that Trader Joe's can sell. So this is going to be very different than our negative feedback loop, whereby the end product inhibited this circuit, because here we are actually enhancing the circuit as we make more of our end product. And a great example of this, I think, is the oxytocin pathway that occurs during childbirth. So during childbirth, you are going to have your pituitary gland. This time we are going to be talking about the posterior pituitary that stores our oxytocin, whereby our ACTH was stored in the anterior pituitary. But in the posterior pituitary, we have our oxytocin. And when our oxytocin is going to be released, that is going to stimulate our uterus to start contracting and stretching. And then these uterine contractions and this uterine stretch is going to act as positive feedback back to our pituitary gland. So positive feedback back to our pituitary gland telling it to release more oxytocin and cause more uterine stretch, and that in turn causes more release of the oxytocin from the pituitary gland. So we go kind of in this cycle that just enhances, and that is what is eventually going to have the baby descend out through the cervix and into the vaginal canal and cause childbirth. So that would be our difference between a positive feedback loop and a negative feedback loop. In our positive feedback loop, we are going to have our end products, again, that are going to be enhancing the effects of the circuit, turning it on, whereas in our negative feedback loop, we are going to have our end products turning the circuit off and decreasing the power of the circuit. Those are going to be two very important mechanisms for several different hormonal pathways that we'll talk about later in this chapter. So I hope that this provided an easy way to remember the difference between these pathways, and I'll see you next time.